Your smartphone chip is basically a tiny city of transistors. That's running into a very unglamorous enemy. Heat, not a little warm. Heat that forces designers to slow down, split workloads, and build entire cooling systems just to keep performance from collapsing. For decades, we lived on one promise: make transistors smaller, and everything gets faster, cheaper, and more efficient. That promise didn't die. It stalled because, at nanoscales, electrons stop acting like obedient particles and start acting like waves. Leakage grows, variability explodes, and shrinking doesn't automatically mean efficiency anymore. So the industry is trying something that sounds ridiculous until you realize it may be inevitable. They're betting on materials so thin the active part of the transistor is almost two-dimensional. One layer, a few layers flat. Not flat like a screen. Flat like the channel is so thin the gate can finally control again. And this isn't a hobbyist trend. This is a global fight worth hundreds of billions per year. Because whoever controls what comes after silicon controls the next era of computing. Here's the twist. Silicon isn't dying like a collapse. It's dying like a plateau. And plateaus change everything. Let's set the scale correctly. The semiconductor industry is already enormous. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And it's being pulled upward by AI, data centers, and the electrification of everything. Market forecasts put around the $600 billion plus range in 2024 with growth continuing into 2025. WSDS is a standard reference. But the race isn't just revenue. It's what it costs to stay competitive. Fabs, EUV tools, masks, process development. An arms race measured in hundreds of billions in capex across the industry, with leading players spending at extreme levels. And the direction of travel is a story. Each step is harder, slower, and more expensive. So when silicon slows down, the world doesn't just get slightly worse phones. It affects AI scaling and national competitiveness, medical imaging, and defense systems, industrial automation, energy grids, and the entire productivity stack of modern economies. This is why post-silicon isn't academic anymore. It's industrial survival. Now let's talk about what's actually breaking, because it's not one problem. It's a pileup. If you want the most honest summary, it's this: we can still shrink features. But shrinking no longer gives us the old rewards. The free lunch depended on Dennard scaling. Smaller transistors meant lower voltage, lower power density, better efficiency. That era ended in the mid-2000s, when voltage scaling stopped keeping up and leakage became brutal. Today, silicon is fighting three villains at once. Villain number one, power and heat. More density doesn't help if you can't remove heat. Performance becomes a thermal negotiation. Villain number two, leakage and control. At tiny gate lengths, the off state becomes harder to maintain. Electrons leak. The device becomes less like a switch and more like a compromise valve. Villain number three, cost and complexity. Each new node demands extreme manufacturing complexity and tighter yield control. The economics get harder, and there's a silent villain beneath all three: interconnect. The wiring increasingly limits performance, not the transistor. So silicon isn't disappearing tomorrow, but it's no longer improving at the rate the world demands. That's why the industry is searching for a new channel material, and why flat suddenly sounds like the most practical physics hack available. Flat means the transistor channel becomes atomically thin, one or a few layers. Why does that matter? Because if the channel is ultra-thin, the gate's electric field can control it more completely. That suppresses short channel effects and helps restore the transistor's identity as a clean on-off switch. That's the dream. Bring back electrostatic control without needing impossible voltage scaling. The key 2D material story is best understood as a cast. The anti-hero, graphene, incredible conductor, but it lacks a band gap, so it struggles to switch off. Great in some roles, not ideal for logic channels. The hero candidate, TMDs like MOS2, WS2, WSA2. They have band gaps suitable for transistor behavior and can be made atomically thin. A high-quality 2D insulator often used as a dielectric or substrate. And then there are more exotic candidates like black phosphorus, promising but challenging. So flat chips isn't one material. It's a class of ultra-thin semiconductors that give us something silicon is losing: control. But can they actually work? Yes, at least in the lab. Here's the honest proof level. Researchers have demonstrated 2D transistors with strong switching behavior, high on-off ratios, reasonable subthreshold behavior, and working device concepts. Peer-reviewed work has benchmarked monolayer MOS2 and WS2 devices, showing that transistor action is physically real in these systems. But here's the line that matters. A lab transistor proves possibility. A chip requires manufacturability. A chip means billions of devices on large wafers with consistent performance with yield high enough to make money. So the question isn't, can a 2D transistor switch? The question is, can we manufacture 2D materials like a foundry manufactures silicon? And the moment you ask that, the entire story collapses into one ugly, decisive interface: the contact. If you want the simplest explanation for why 2D chips aren't in your phone, the lab is not the factory. 2D materials face three brutal bottlenecks. 1. Defects and contamination. At atomic thickness, a missing atom isn't a small defect. It can be a functional disaster. Defect become dopants, traps, and leakage paths. 2. Contacts. Making low resistance, stable metal contacts to an atomically thin semiconductor is harder than it sounds. Interface physics can pin energy levels and create barriers that destroy performance. Contact resistance becomes a wall. 3. Integration and yield. Even if you can make a beautiful film, integrating it into CMOS flows with acceptable thermal budgets, patterning steps, and cleanliness, then doing it at high yield is a massive challenge. Everything else, doping control, wafer scale uniformity, patterning damage, ultimately feeds into these three. This is why scaling 2D materials isn't just make it bigger, it's make it repeatable. And repeatability is what foundries sell. This race has layers. Universities prove new physics. Institutes and pilot lines try integration. Equipment companies build tools. Foundries decide what's real. And foundries have one rule: they will not bet a multi-billion-dollar fab on something that can't hit yield. That's why public roadmaps tend to place 2D materials on a longer horizon, more 2030s than next year. In the meantime, industry keeps winning through practical strategies: advanced packaging chiplets, 3D stacking, and smarter architecture, which raises the most important truth in this whole silicon is dead conversation. The next era may not replace silicon. It may wrap silicon in new layers of technology until a true successor is ready. 2D materials aren't the only post-silicon direction. 3D stacking and chiplets are the near-term winner, already happening in advanced products. Instead of shrinking forever, we stack and interconnect. Carbon nanotube transistors are serious contenders, with a lab-scale microprocessor demonstration already achieved. 3. These semiconductors dominate RF and power electronics, but are harder to scale into mainstream logic everywhere. Spintronics, photonics, neuromorphic devices remain specialized or longer horizon. So what's the realistic outcome? Not silicon or 2D. It's heterogeneous integration. Silicon where it's unbeatable 2D materials, where ultra-thin control matter CNTs, where mobility and low power win advanced packaging, stitching everything together. So, flat chips might arrive first not as your CPU core, but as specialized layers and functions inside a larger chip stack. That's still a revolution, just a quieter one. Here's the reality check: 1 to 5 years. 2D materials show up first in niche devices, sensors, RF, mixed signal, flexible formats, where the value is obvious and yield requirements are manageable. 5 to 10 years. Pilot-level integration becomes plausible in certain flows, especially where 2D devices can be added late in the process. 10 to 20 years. Broader adoption only if multiple breakthroughs happen. Low defect wafer scale films, stable low resistance contacts, high yield, long-term reliability. This isn't pessimism. It's what lab to fab always looks like. Silicon has the world's most advanced manufacturing ecosystem behind it. That doesn't disappear quickly. So, silicon is dead is not a date. It's a direction. Let's kill the myths fast. Silicon disappears in 5 years. No, graphene replaces CPU channels. Not likely for logic switching. it shines elsewhere. 2D transistors are already in iPhones. No, 2D materials are easy to mass produce. That's the hard part. Moore's law is dead. It's slowing and changing, especially the efficiency side. The right mindset is systems engineering. Materials plus architecture plus packaging plus yield. If you're a student engineer or tech enthusiast, here's the real takeaway. The next era won't be won by one magical material. It will be won by whoever can combine advanced materials, manufacturable processes, and architectures that turn physical limits into design constraints. And what do you think is the real bottleneck? Defects, contacts, or integration? Silicon isn't dead, but the era of effortless progress is over. That's why the industry is betting on flat materials, atomically thin channels that can restore control at scales where silicon starts fighting itself. The future of chips is becoming a layered stack of solutions. Silicon scaling, chiplets, 3D integration, and new channel materials, possibly 2D, where they matter most. This is what Future Forge Explored exists for. To explain the materials shaping tomorrow before they become normal, before they become invisible, before they're inside everything you own. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead. Because next, we're going into the real battleground. The one problem that decides whether 2D chips live or die. The metal contact. The interface that has to be perfect on a material that's only one atom thick.